My name is Brendan Miller, and I'm counsel for Freedom Corp, which is the entity that represents the protesters that were in Ottawa in January and February of 2022. I have a few questions for you, and hopefully we'll be able to get through them. Ma'am, you had just mentioned, and I'm glad you did, the rule of law. What's your understanding of the rule of law?
That laws are obeyed in the country of Canada, provincial, federal, and municipal laws.
Right. And you agree with me that the rule of law applies to you and it applies to the executive and the elected executive of the government of Canada?
Yes.
All right. Would you agree with this, that the rule of law conveys a sense of orderliness and executive accountability to legal authority and vouches safe a stable, predictable, and ordered society in which citizens and residents may conduct their affairs? It requires that government power or any authority delegated by Parliament must be exercised pursuant to valid laws, either directly or indirectly permitted by an act of Parliament. Do you agree with that?
I do.
All right. Now, you can agree with me that your position, your office, and I'll call it your office, the National Intelligence and Security Advisor, it's not been created by an act of Parliament, has it?
No,
No.
it does not. It's an advisor.
Right. And you have no statutory mandate.
I do not.
And you've also got no legal powers yourself.
I do not, which I explained when I talked about what my role is.
Right. And I take it you've never been an intelligence officer with CSIS or within the intelligence community, is that correct?
I have not.
And you've never been an intelligence analyst with CSIS or in the intelligence community, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. So you said in your evidence that you didn't feel that you were getting the proper intelligence or updated intelligence from law enforcement or from CSIS, or weren't getting enough of it. Is that fair?
I didn't say that about CSIS.
All right. So you were satisfied with the intelligence you received from CSIS?
I was.
And CSIS specifically told you and Cabinet that there was no Section 2 CSIS Act threat posed by the protest or posed by any of the actions going on throughout Canada at the time, did they not?
You're misinterpreting what CSIS said.
Can you tell me how? Because I can put up the statement and
Right.
the reports, because
Right.
that's what it says.
But there isn't, what they said and the interpretation of what they said are two entirely different things. Their mandate is very narrow. And so Section 2 of the CSIS Act is about the work that CSIS does and the intelligence they collect. And they said they are not the only arbiters of what is a national security threat in this country.
Okay.
And so very true that they said that vis-a-vis their particular act.
Right. And the thing is you agree with me that the CSIS Act, the meaning of security threat to Canada, is incorporated directly into the Emergencies Act, correct?
You're going to receive legal briefs on the Emergencies Act and the legal interpretation, and I'm not a lawyer. My understanding is that the Emergencies Act is assigned the meaning as defined in the CSIS Act, but is not limited by the CSIS Act.
Well, I don't know how that could be, but we can agree to disagree. But you agree that the Emergencies Act on its own reading, and I put this to the Deputy Minister, you understand that it requires reasonable grounds that a Section 2 CSIS Act threat exists.
I don't agree.
That's what it says.
No, it says it assigns meaning as the language is defined in the CSIS Act. But again, you'll get legal arguments.
Right, I understand. So you're saying that the CSIS Act and Section 2 of the CSIS Act, which is incorporated into the Emergencies Act, means something different when you're looking at it.
No, that's not what I've said.
So what do you mean?
I mean that in terms of the Emergency Act, the governor and council can consider more broadly than the intelligence collected by CSIS in determining a national security threat or situation or a public order emergency.
I understand that, but you do agree that the 4 grounds of types of threats in Section 2 of the CSIS Act are what is in fact required to have been found.
No, I don't agree.
So it can go beyond what the Act says, which is a threat to the security of Canada.
There are other definitions of threats to the security of Canada, as we saw earlier.
Right, but not in the legislation.
The Emergency Act allows for the Governor and Council to make a broad decision about public order emergencies.
That's not what it says, but you can agree with me.
I think that this is an argument to have with lawyers.
Well, I understand that. So let's go through then just what Section 2 of the CSIS Act says, and I'll just ask you a couple of questions about the grounds. And we've already heard from every law enforcement official, as well as we have the statements from CSIS and evidence, that they didn't have reasonable suspicion that any of this was taking place. So I take it that you can agree with me that you didn't have any evidence with you before Cabinet or even considered of any espionage or sabotage against Canada that is detrimental to the interests of Canada or activities directed towards or in support of such espionage or sabotage, right?
That's been discussed, yes.
Right. And so that there was no evidence of that you considered
No.
in your assessment. And you could agree with me that there's no evidence of foreign influenced activities within or related to Canada that are detrimental to the interests of Canada, are clandestine or deceptive, or involve a threat to any person, correct?
There were threats to people.
Right. By email and Twitter, right?
I would submit that in the social media era, you cannot ignore threats against officials and public office holders just because they are on social media. That would be inexcusably negligent.
Right, but that's up to the police to deal with, or is that a national emergency?
It depends on the situation in the context in which those threats arrive.
Okay, can we please bring up document ts.nsc.can.001 000000206 underscore rel 0001. Oh, apologies, just a second. Wrong one. I'll just say the end numbers. Same forward. 159 underscore rel 0001. Okay, so I take it that you're familiar with the CSIS assessment that they provided on the Freedom Convoy in downtown Ottawa, right?
That's one of the assessments.
Right, okay. And their assessment was this, and at the beginning, you see downtown Ottawa was actually quite festive, not threatening to a passerby. Some criminal acts did occur, law enforcement. And again, you've said you're not an intelligence officer, you don't have any training as an intelligence analysis, so I take it you rely on CSIS for intelligence.
CSIS provides one input on intelligence, yes.
Yeah, and then the RCMP?
Another input,
Right, and then the Canadian Border Services agencies?
another input,
Right, and then you also have the Canadian Security Establishment?
yes.
Right, okay. None of those people provided you intelligence that there was a Section 2 CSIS Act threat?
Again, we've been through this. There are other measures other than Section 2 of the CSIS Act.
So let's scroll down, if we can. And you'll see in there with respect to the flags. Now, I take it there was concern with these flags that there was a couple of flags that were seen that were inappropriate, and that was one of the reasons why there was a consideration of ideological motivated violent extremism. You can see there that I understand that their report is a very small number of more inflammatory flags, Confederate, Nazi, swastika, 3%er, Punisher, based on the 1974 comic book hero, and Quebec Patriot flag. And then they say that a random flag is just a flag until the reason the person holding it explains why. Flags can have multiple meanings and are routinely co-opted by various groups, individuals. No way of connecting those views holding flags with any online content. The presence of 3% flags, for example, does not necessarily mean that members of the 3% are in attendance. And that was the intelligence you were given.
That's part of the intelligence we were given. That's intelligence that can be released.
Okay. So what do you mean intelligence can be released? So,
Well, there's Section 38.
right, I understand that. But why don't we scroll down? Now, this is important. And you know that CSIS does, in fact, because there's no reason, you don't need a law to look at what's online or open source intelligence, that it's open source intelligence. Anybody can look at it without a law authorizing it. Can you agree with that?
No, the reality is that open source intelligence has to be anonymized so that we are not targeting specific people who are not under investigation. So it's not quite as simple as you're depicting it.
Well, ma'am, again, there's no privacy interest for Canadians on things they post online. Anybody can go on and read it, right? You know that.
Yes, but the privacy commissioner and the privacy laws of this country are such that they cannot then their information cannot be scraped and be part of an assessment writ large. There has to be boundaries around that.
Around its distribution.
No, around its analysis and collection.
Right, and that's why
storage.
And that's why we have units in the RCMP that do that.
Some of it, yes.
Right, so you have I believe it's called the IMCIT unit. That's all they look at, is they look at online violent rhetoric and assess it.
For criminal purposes, yes.
Right, and so for violent rhetoric, what are your other purposes other than criminal purposes?
Well, so I would like to be a little more expansive in this answer, if I may be. An analyst looks at a piece of information for very specific issues. When we, as people advising, and it's my deputy minister colleagues and I, to advise the cabinet and decision makers on the threat, the confidence in government institutions, the rhetoric, we have to look more broadly than at specific elements as described here. Someone should kill the PM. Wouldn't it be great if someone killed the PM? That says something. And it's not just random because they can't identify it to an individual and it doesn't say the day, doesn't mean it doesn't matter.
So what are you looking for? Are you looking that the government without warrants is allowed just to go and look into metadata?
No, that's what I just said to you.
Yeah, so
I just said to you that we should not be doing that, and so we have to find a legal framework for it. We are actually violently agreeing.
Okay, well, that's good. So, and we agree that we should follow legal frameworks.
We should, and I believe there is a gap in the legal framework.
And you agree we should follow the legal framework in the Emergencies Act, right?
And we have.
Okay. And then can I just show you that part up there? CSIS assessed this and—
Excuse me, we've never established the date of this document. Can we see what it's dated, please?
Freedom Convoy 2022, it's an assessment of CSIS. I believe it's been referred to in the statement. It's from your production. I assume that it's relevant and material.
I'm not arguing that. I'm just asking to establish if there's a date on the document, perhaps at the last page.
No. But I understand that, and the witness has accepted that this was one of the assessments that was before cabinet. So—
Well, no, I didn't say it was before cabinet. I said it was produced.
Okay.
And I believe it was before the convoy arrived.
So the CSIS had assessed the anonymity of the online space allows individuals to post commentary that they would not normally say in public. Many of the posts in this space are best articulated as shit posting. Confirmation bias. Strategic analysis must be driven by direct evidence collection and assessments as opposed to a reliance on social media posting, lacks context, and where the poster bias may not be considered. So that had been given to you by CSIS, and do you not agree with that?
I believe that it is an analysis done by an analyst, and that is the National Security and Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister. When I see social media posts growing in number and aggressiveness of language that says somebody should kill the PM or somebody should kill the DPM, I have reason to be concerned beyond what the analyst is concerned about.
Okay. So I'm just going to run over very briefly what I understand your position is, and your position as National Security Advisor, I've managed to find the policy with respect to your position. So if you can agree with the following, this is what you are to do. The National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister and Associate Secretary to Cabinet assists the clerk and provides information, advice, and recommendations to the Prime Minister as follows. As Associate Secretary to Cabinet, he or she can act on the clerk's behalf on any of the policy and operational issues that come before the Privy Council. As National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister, he or she ensures the effective coordination of Canada's security and intelligence community, and together with the Deputy Ministers of National Defence, is responsible for the communication security establishment. The National Security Advisor also oversees the provisions of intelligence assessments to the Prime Minister, other ministers, and senior government officials. The National Security Advisor to the Prime Minister is supported by 2 secretariats via the Foreign and Defence Policy Advisors to the Prime Minister, Security and Intelligence, and International Assessment Staff. That's what your job is.
That's an old version of the job description. There's been some changes to it since then, but sure.
Right. But you are not in the business, or your department is not supposed to be in the business of actually collecting intelligence yourself.
We don't collect intelligence ourselves.
But I thought you'd said that it was looked at, you were setting up your own bureau or what have you to look at online rhetoric and do your own open source intelligence.
What I said is that there is no one doing that in a broad sense. I saw it as a gap. I need to do something about it. I don't have the legal mandate right now to do it. The OSINT document you saw previously is all obtained through legal means as an analysis. What we need is we need a unit in PCO or public safety that is more akin to the Foreign Intelligence Assessment Unit that takes covert and overt information and makes assessments. We don't have that domestically. It is a gap. I don't have a solution for it yet, and I won't be the sole person who decides whether it happens or not, but it is something that we need to look at, and I'm exploring. That's my job.
Why would you need that outside of the civil service, who are governed by legislation that collect intelligence?
It would be part of the civil service, just like the Foreign Intelligence Assessment Unit is part of the civil service.
Right, but the Foreign Intelligence Service, like the International Assessment Staff and Foreign Intelligence Service, you had the information from them, I take it, when the cabinet made this decision, did you not?
They were assessing foreign intelligence, not domestic intelligence.
And domestic intelligence was being assessed by the RCMP.
Who assess also foreign intelligence.
Right. CSIS.
Who also assess foreign intelligence.
The Canadian Security Intelligence
Who
Staff.
also assess foreign intelligence.
And they also look at domestic intelligence.
Some of them do, CSE does not. So just as those units all have mandates to collect and do some assessment, we see that raw intelligence and we make assessments of it on the foreign side. I would like an equivalent on the domestic side. I don't have that now. I believe it is a gap.
So why is what the RCMP does already doing that with their reports? They have 2 sets. They have the IMVE assessments online. They have the onset assessments online. Why is that not good enough for you?
Because I would like to look at, just as we do with foreign intelligence, all the various pieces in totality rather than institution by institution. It's part of our job to give a holistic picture.
And it's your job, according to this description, to effectively coordinate all that anyway.
Right, but I need to have people with the mandate to do that assessment, which is I coordinate the function and the issues, the issues management of what's going on in the national security community, but not necessarily their intelligence assessment.
How about this? What if they just got rid of your position and left it to the director of CSIS to do what you do?
So the director of CSIS is not the only person who is responsible for security in this country. That's number one. You can certainly make that recommendation to the governor and council if it's useful to you, but there are more people than him involved in assessing national security in this country.
But it's nothing passed by Parliament, right? Parliament
The Privy
decides.
Council office is an established office that is essentially the Prime Minister's department. We coordinate information, we challenge, we provide policy advice to the Prime Minister, and I am part of that mechanism.
I understand that, but you can agree that Parliament has given you no mandate to do that with respect to intelligence.
I don't agree with how you framed it.
Parliament? So
I
there's-
don't agree with the basic premise of your challenge.
Well, here you go, yes or no. Has Parliament, via statute, given you, the National Security Advisor and the Privy Council, authority to collect and then analyze intelligence?
The Foreign Intelligence and Assessment Group is a longstanding group that no, Parliament hasn't given it authority, but it exists and it continues.